Good afternoon and welcome to the Full Scottish with me, Gordon Ross, leaving my usual evening slot to see you during the daytime today. Anyway, to get on with the show, first of all, my two guests this afternoon are Andrew Wilson, the Secretary of the new organisation Now Scotland. Welcome to you, Andrew. How are you?
Good afternoon, Gordon. It's great to be here. I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm exhausted, Andrew, but apart from that, I'm absolutely fine. And also, also joining us this afternoon is Julie Coombe from the Equity Union. Hello, Julie. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. Good afternoon. Had a wee bit of a technical panic logging on there, but I'm here and I'm very happy to be here.
All right, Julie. Well, I'm going to read through the coronavirus update first of all before we launch into this afternoon's programme. Now, according to the statistics we've received today, there have been 895 new confirmed cases of COVID-19. There are 48 new reported deaths, sadly, of people who have tested positive in the last 48 hours. Last 48 days, or 28 days, I beg your pardon. And since the start of the pandemic, the total number of people in Scotland who have been tested is 1,594,769. And of these 1,409,561 have tested negative, and 185,208 were positive tests. There were 1,729 people in hospital last night, 117 of whom were in intensive care. 6,431 patients who tested positive have sadly died from their illness. 786,427 people in Scotland have now received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 10,332 have received their second dose. Now, moving on from the whole issue of the pandemic, and the vaccination news today is looking a lot better. We now have a total number of people of 786,427 having received a first dose. And this is a big acceleration, actually, in the figures since the previous week. Now, over 93% of over 80s have received their first dose. And a total of 272,365 frontline health and social care workers have also been vaccinated, exceeding the initial target of 230,000. Now, let me first of all come to you, Andrew. There has been a dispute, hasn't there, over the figures of how many people have been vaccinated. There seems to be a little bit of misinformation going around that Scotland was lagging behind. Do you think that's the case, or have the figures been a little misrepresented, do you think?
I think some of the more fringe elements of political organisations might seek to spin the numbers, spin the data a little bit, but I think that spinning has been counterproductive and hasn't really achieved very much at all. I think by the nature of the size of a country like Scotland, we all know people who've been vaccinated. We all know people who are working so hard to be vaccinators. We know people who are volunteering for that important work. So we know, I think, instinctively, because we hear about it in our own daily lives, the amount of work that's going on and the success that there has been. So a little bit of spinning of these numbers across the border, or spinning for political purposes, is disappointing, but it doesn't amount to very much at all.
Okay. Julie, let me come to you for your reaction to these figures. We've all been watching the unfolding vaccination programme across Scotland. It now seems to be ramping up dramatically. And Jean Freeman has said today that she says she hopes to see a significant drop in the disease due to the vaccination programme, but feels that it will take a number of months to evaluate it fully. The information that we're seeing here in our newsroom shows that there now is a very steep decline in the number of cases, almost mirroring the rise which happened just after the Christmas period. Would you have expected, Julie, the figures to do this, to rise sharply during the Christmas relaxation? I think many people had predicted it.
Yes, I think so. Unfortunately, with this virus, it seems to be you basically throw a blanket over it and pin it down, and that seems to be very effective. If no one's moving, and obviously it's been disastrous for our industry and many industries, many professions. But if you sort of you tie it down, but as soon as that blanket is lifted and people get a bit more gallus with it, shall we say, and you can completely understand that at Christmas people wanted to see their families, and people were desperate for human contact. But I was just sort of sitting back there thinking, right, it's going to shoot up, it's going to absolutely shoot up, and then we're going to be back to massive strictures again. So I think even with a steep decline, we have to be very, very canny about it, because we don't want to. I've got a friend in Wales, and Wales seem to have been in and out and in and out. They seem to have been doing the hokey cokey with the lockdown, and I think we're better not to do that. We're better to take it very easily, gently, canny, and really, really get it on the. Be sure that we're not going to have this massive spike again, because we don't want to come back to massive strictures and lockdown. We can't cope with that.
No, okay. Julie, I've got some other figures here. Okay, we had a figure released today. It was almost 800,000 people have been vaccinated now. 93% of the over 80s in the community, and that means, I presume, outside of care homes, and nearly 100% in care homes, 99% in care homes. And I'm sure we all know somebody in our family who's been waiting for a vaccine. Do you have older members of your family who've been vaccinated as well?
Do you know what? We are in a very strange position. My kids are grown up. We're a household of 4 adults at the moment. My kids are 25. It's great fun, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
Although they seem to revert to baby status, I know, because I'm running after them like mad. But my kids are 25 and 22. And both my husband and I don't have parents anymore, sadly.
Oh.
My mother-in-law died 2 years ago, and she was the last standing grandparent. So we haven't been shielding older relatives or worried about homeschooling and all that. And I kind of feel a bit guilty about that we've been in the middle and almost a sort of untouched little bubble. My husband is self-isolating at the moment because he's getting a wee operation in a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. But we do feel a bit sort of, I can be objective about it, if you know what I mean, and I can sympathise with my friends who are so desperate to hug their parents, and my friends, children crying because they want to see their grandparents, but we're kind of daftly untouched by it. Yeah. But I totally understand, the need. But I'm so delighted that there's been so much take up on vaccination. And hopefully we'll all be done soon.
Okay. Andrew, if I could return to you for a moment. We've also been hearing that the over 50s are due to be vaccinated before May. Now, that's quite a long time from now, isn't it? And myself being over 50, I'm sitting here wondering when I'm going to get my vaccination. Have you thought much about that, about the over 50s, that huge cohort of people who are coming towards the end of their working lives, coming towards their retirement, and still wondering how long they're going to have to wait before they can go back to work?
It's a very good question, Gordon. I'm in that demographic as well, at least the demographic of age. I don't see myself retiring anytime soon, but certainly I'm in the over 50s too. I think it's important that we reflect carefully on the most effective way in which to reduce the rate at which this virus kills people. Uh-huh. We know that the most effective way to reduce the death count was to vaccinate those in care homes first, and first.
It's been done now.
As I recall, if you the rate at which you would reduce the mortality was exponentially greater if you vaccinated in care homes first. And certainly my recollection from the first wave of the virus, a care home in which a member of my family was staying, 25% of the residents passed away in a month.
That's incredible.
So the need to reduce deaths first it was critically important, and so we've done that. I think the mortality amongst those over 50 is significantly improved than it was in the first wave as well. Our understanding of how to treat and to cope and to manage this virus is significantly advanced than when it was when we started this crisis, and so I feel that as an over 50 white male, the target that was on my back at the beginning of the year has faded significantly. I think it's important that we vaccinate both those who are at greatest risk, but also those who are working on the front line. And I think the definition of who are frontline workers we ought to consider expanding it as we get the engine of this vaccination program really running. So I think, for example, teachers we might consider prioritising teachers in order that education can continue to return quickly. So I think we need to continue focusing on particular groups where the benefits are the greatest, and so long as the rest of us who are over 50 continue to behave ourselves and act respectfully both towards others and to ourselves, then I think we'll be okay.
Okay, well, thank you, Andrew. I'm going to move on now to a different subject now, and there's been reports in the press today of a junior priest, I think, or a cleric, having made a tweet describing the so-called cult of Captain Tom and raising the subject of a cult of British or white British nationalism arising south of the border. Now, there has been in recent days a survey of people, expat Scots you might want to call them, I suppose, who were planning to return to Scotland in the near future. And there seems to have been, amongst the people surveyed, a cohort of them who felt a change or a shift in the atmosphere in England and had gone from basically just banter, as we would call it, where the different parts of the United Kingdom are engaging in a little bit of sarcastic to and fro, to something a little bit more sinister. Have you detected that yourself? Let me ask you first, Julie. Have you detected any of that? Or do you know anybody, particularly who's come back to Scotland, saying this?
I just should make a point, actually, when you introduced me and saying that I'm from Equity, the union. I'm a member of Equity. I'm actually an actor and a writer, but I've been very much involved with this current Equity campaign. But as a touring performer, 2019, I spent most of the year down in England and in Wales, and I definitely detected a shift. And I said to my husband, he was with me, and I'd said to him before, I think there's a change. I just feel that there's a change. And he was saying, "Oh, don't be silly. Don't be coming over all William Wallace on everybody." And even though we're sort of passionate supporters of independence, but he said to me, "This has changed." And we were down there at Remembrance time, and we were kind of appalled at the fetishisation of the poppy, and the fetishisation of the Union flag. It seems to be that there is a certain part of society that will grab onto anything that that they think symbolises this spirit of the Blitz and all the thing that I think has pushed us into this awful Brexit position that we're in. But I definitely noticed a change when I was down in England looking after my son, who had had an operation when he was at university. I went into Marks and Spencer's in Cambridge with a £20 note to buy an umbrella. It was raining, and I said it was a Scottish £20 note, and the woman in Marks and Spencer said, "Oh, we don't take those." And I said, "Well, you're going to have to, because I don't have anything else." And she said, "Oh, okay, I'll just stick it at the back of the till." And I started to notice things like that from then on, and that was just before we voted for the Brexit vote. And I think it has steadily got worse. And I think poor Captain Tom's found himself as a wee bit kind of hijacked. Yeah. And he's a wee soul, and God rest him, but I think he's been a wee bit hijacked.
Yeah, okay. Andrew, this so-called cult of British nationalism, I mean, Julie's mentioning the poppy there, and we're sort of all aware of the fact that that particular iconography is utilised to, what shall we say, not to celebrate, but to almost to wallow in nostalgia for wars. Do you feel that want to go back to the days of the war is as strong in Scotland as it is south of the border?
That's a very interesting question, Gordon. It raises quite a range of issues and questions, especially in terms of the experience amongst the Scottish population of military activity or militarism. Of course, it's been the case for more than 100 years that a higher proportion of Scots served in the armed forces than folks from England or Wales. So I think there's a deeper understanding of what it means to commit to military service in Scotland, and I think that possibly then is reflected in a different approach amongst the people of Scotland. Yes, of course, they recognise commemoration and recognising the commitment that individuals who have volunteered and who have served have given, but I think certainly that what we're seeing is what I think we're beginning to see, and it was inevitable in a way. The especially in England, that the English are, as a result of Brexit, are now having to reappraise what English nationalism means, what it stands for, what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
As Scots and most other nations, we have a fairly clear idea about ourselves as a nation.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's always been I think both as a result of the history of empire and also because of the unique way in which the United Kingdom was constituted. I think there hasn't been much of a reflection on what English nationalism means, and that is now only starting. So I think we will see some stresses and strains as that process of the English working out what their place in the world is, albeit much reduced as a result of Brexit, working out what it is that they stand for. And that will be challenged as a result of the determination of the current government to withdraw from all manner of what might be understood to be basic principles of human rights and justice and the rule of law. So I think we're entering into a period probably of many years in which we will see the English start to begin to work out more clearly what it means in terms of English nationalism. I think Julie's point is absolutely right. It's very clear that. Captain Moore was a well-respected soldier and inspired was able to inspire people in a positive way during a very difficult time in everyone's lives, but that he certainly found himself pushed very much to the forefront. Started to become politicized, and of course, his untimely death should be marked and respected. But as Julie said, the iconography round about the militarism and a determination to apparently relive the 1940s, and I'm minded that now there are very, very few people around who have a very clear recollection of what happened in the 1940s. The numbers of people who I think there's nobody left alive in Scotland who actually served, and so the distance in time that we have now since the 1940s means that people are attaching themselves in a manner to things that they do not understand and did not experience. So I think that invalidates in part their position and their perspective.
Just before we leave this particular subject, one of the threads running through the campaign for leaving the European Union was this hostility towards immigration or immigrants from virtually anywhere. Do you think that has spilled over now into an internal hostility towards migration of Scots or Welsh or Irish people into England?
Well, that's also an interesting point. I should say, pre-COVID, I spent at least 50% of my working life each week working in England, and I never encountered any difficulty at all. That could be for a range of reasons, but I certainly didn't feel. I've never encountered racism in England, and I didn't feel. I've not encountered a rise in it. However, I think you're absolutely right. It both is as a result of Brexit, which clearly Brexit politicians, if I can class them in that way, put immigration front and centre. We remember the pictures of Farage standing in front of his poster. We remember the scare stories about immigration from Turkey when if Turkey was to join the EU. So it definitely was a racist programme. There's no question. But I think that bleeds across into mainstream politics. We have we've had a Tory administration now for many years, which put as one of its fundamental planks on its platform a hostile environment to people who didn't look like the rest of us or whatever, and attempts to step away from our commitments and our obligations with regard to refugees, a demonising of refugees. And a program of government which was apparently dead set in terms of reducing of demonising and then reducing immigrants in an attempt to explain away or to distract public attention from more fundamental issues and more significant problems. So yes, I think there is a racist thread that is now through politics in England in particular, given the size of the majority that the Conservative government currently has.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much for a very detailed answer, Andrew. We're going to move the conversation on now to the subject of exports from the United Kingdom and how they have been affected by the sudden exit of the United Kingdom on the 1st of January. Now, according to reports we're seeing today, there's a lot of anger directed at Michael Gove in particular, because according to the Road Haulage Association and many other professional bodies, there's been basically our exports have been slashed by 68% since Brexit. We're only not even 2 months into Brexit, and we've lost nearly 2/3 of our exports already. Julie, do you want to have a go at this subject? 2/3 of our exports are gone within, a month and a half. Do you expect it to happen so fast?
I probably expected it to happen faster because, I've been catastrophizing Brexit since it started. I just want to say Andrew's answer about the whole racism thing was brilliant, and it ties in with the whole Brexit. Brexit picked a scab of a particularly ugly aspect of humanity, and I really find it very difficult to see anything good in it. So, I will try, but I do find it very difficult to see anything good. But with the exports, yes, we've all seen the lorries. We've all read the articles about the paperwork that, a paperwork that's taken a day before your lorry can even set off to go to Europe. And then you've obviously got similar things coming back. Mm-hmm. But I expected it to be worse, and anger at Michael Gove is very, I think that should be a default setting for most people.
Anger at Gove should be endemic, should it?
Get it, Gove.
Okay.
Yes. But yeah, obviously with actors and performers, we're in the business of exporting entertainment and exporting people, if you like, and it's quite catastrophic for our business. I just cannot tell you. It's incredible.
I was going to say, Julie, we're going to return in some detail to the effects of Brexit on the entertainment industry in Scotland in a few minutes. But before I do that, I'd like to just leave you for the moment, go over to Andrew for his reaction. Andrew, I'm sitting here with some figures in front of me. There's more detail to this than we've seen so far. According to the Road Haulage Association and some of the other export organisations in Scotland, we only have 20% of the customs agents actually required to assist companies with mountains of extra paperwork. And they're telling us that between 65 and 75% of trucks return to Europe, having come here and imported stuff, return empty. And so, what What encouragement is there now for truck drivers from Europe to even start to bring stuff to the UK when they can't fill their trucks for the return journey?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Gordon. And in terms of the way in which the haulage industry currently works across Europe, my understanding is that most European hauliers, drivers, are paid by the hour. Sorry, are paid by the kilometre, not by the
Yep.
hour. So if their vehicles are stationary at a port, or are stationary waiting for clearance, or are stationary because they can't get into Kent or out of Kent, then it doesn't make financial sense to them. And in particular, as the point you make, what I think are called backloads, which is the contents of the vehicle on its return journey. If backloads are not there, then the entire economic structure of the haulage industry grinds to a halt. I'm minded that there's a without wanting to emphasise the differences. Scotland, of course, is a net exporter. England is not.
Yeah.
Scotland, with its wealth, in particular of food and drink exports, is a net export. Has a considerable balance of payments excess in terms of the amount that we export
Yep.
as compared to what we import, and that is the reverse of England. And I'm reminded from about 18 months ago, standing on the pier at Portellen on Islay with some colleagues, watching brown crab being landed by a local fisherman. And the brown crab were being loaded into, we're still live, of course, and were being loaded into containers in order that they could be flown to Japan.
Right.
And also the other longusteens that were being landed were being packed into different containers in order that they could be taken immediately to Paris. Now, how any of that, and these are small businesses, workboats, not giant North Sea trawlers. So how those businesses are now continuing when all of their export markets have effectively stopped because of the paperwork, because there's no live shellfish exports from the UK to Europe at all now, I think. So all of those industries have just stopped. And so we're seeing the hauliers in grave difficulties, we're seeing the producers in grave difficulties, and of course in the fishing industry, we're seeing the processors in grave difficulty as well, because no matter if they process the fish again, they can't export it fast enough. And so, especially in rural communities, the impact of this ill thought out and wrong-headed approach to Brexit, the impact is going to be, it couldn't be greater.
Okay, well, listen, Andrew, thank you for that. Julie, if I could turn to you now, a couple of other points came out of this survey, one of which I think maybe hasn't occurred to most people to know about this, but European Union supply chain companies are now apparently reluctant to service the UK market. Now, that means any companies in the UK which manufacture anything which requires parts or commodities from Europe may now not be able to manufacture those things at all. So it's not just about the movement of goods, it's actually affecting the manufacturing as well.
Yeah. I mean, my husband reads everything to do with Brexit because something in him died when that vote happened. But yeah, he talks about that all the time. And there was the recent thing with Marks and Spencer's Percy Pigs or something, and how they couldn't come from where they were coming from. Obviously, they were manufactured, but they couldn't come from where they were. But with our manufacturing industry, has been, it's pretty much, it's been on the downhill for a long, long time, which is why our big service, if have been financial services and things like that. I mean, why would you bother manufacturing something for a country when it's going to cost you a lot more and going to be at least 10 times the hassle? I just don't see it. I myself, being the person who would like to opt for an easy life, I just don't see it. I mean, Andrew will be able to tell you a lot more about all that, but to me, it just seems counterintuitive and almost like self-sabotage to put anything in that's going to stop us having this commerce with people.
One of the other things which has come out of the survey, and it was an admission by Michael Gove himself, was that Northern Ireland faces more serious issues than the rest of the United Kingdom simply because there's now a border in the Irish Sea. And that means that anything being brought into Northern Ireland from mainland UK is now subject to these same restrictions, the slow speed of transit through customs. It's subject to extra charges and handling charges and VAT and so on. And we're seeing shortages of certain products and things in the shelves in Northern Ireland. And I sometimes think Northern Ireland is really the one part of the United Kingdom which has taken the biggest hit. And yet we don't hear so much about it, do we?
Well, the thing is, we actually have been working very closely with our Northern Irish comrades with this equity campaign because I don't know if you know, Gordon, but the Glasgow office ran Scotland and Northern Ireland because I think there are about 400 members in Northern Ireland. And so they've been talking about it a lot. And they've been told by our General Secretary that Northern Ireland is going to enjoy this fabulously unique position in Brexit. And I have to say that none of the Northern Irish people that I've spoken to agree with him. They are just up in arms. They don't know they don't know what's happening. They don't also this, the border and the Irish Sea, was that supposed to be there? No, I don't think so. And I think they feel that they are about to be shafted yet again. And I think, that's the thing about Brexit. I don't think many of us are going to get away without being shafted, but Northern Ireland is somewhere that if I was a politician, I would be incredibly worried about at the moment. And I think they have to do their best to make sure they don't break any terms of Good Friday Agreement. And they really need to be held to account on Northern Ireland. And it oughtn't to be forgotten about or pushed to the side. And hopefully it won't be.
Okay. Just one other thing. I think I'll put this question to you, Andrew. The SNP has issued a press release today saying that the 68% drop in exports is unforgivable. And according to reports in today's Observer, the Road Haulage Association has warned Michael Gove that in addition to the drop in exports, up to 3/4 of vehicles coming to Britain from the EU were going back empty because UK companies were halting exports or facing hold-ups. And he says also, he goes on to say, and in fact it's acknowledged by the Road Haulage Association, that we're facing a perfect storm because when we come out of COVID and business is supposedly trying to get back to normal, many of the companies which weren't prepared for Brexit right now are still not going to be prepared for it because there's no sign of any help coming from the UK government.
I think that's right, Gordon. I think there have been certain steps have been taken by the UK government, but nothing like the preparation and nothing like the planning and nothing like the financial support that will be required. I think Julie's point regarding our friends in Northern Ireland is absolutely right. There's a sense of impending doom here, and that's not a surprise. The implications on people's daily lives are only at the very beginning of being understood, and so I think we'll see a great deal many more challenges, and both for individuals and for businesses across all sorts of sectors, not just manufacturing. I think we're just at the beginning of understanding the fundamental and significant implications of what has been done to us against our wishes.
Andrew, one final point with regards to the export damage caused by Brexit. Contained in the SNP press release is a statement which says that a majority of Scots think Brexit is going badly. 62% of Scots in a YouGov poll. The SNP is demanding a compensation package for Scottish export manufacturers, the fish companies, shellfish companies and so forth. And Ireland is currently... Northern Ireland is currently getting £1.05 billion in mitigation funds from the European Union. And we're seeing nothing in Scotland from the UK government to mitigate the effects of Brexit. Are the SNP's demands for compensation well founded? And is there any chance at all that the British government would ever give compensation?
I think the request for support and or compensation or intervention, I think, is absolutely necessary because of the huge changes and the fundamental shock to our economy that the imposition of Brexit and the imposition of this particular Brexit are having on people. As to whether the current UK government will be prepared to respond positively to those requests, it's an interesting question. My gut reaction would be no. Of course they won't. All we'll get is more visits from Boris Johnson and Michael Gove. But by the same token, of course, we know that there are signs that the UK government is keen to begin to demonstrate the broad shoulders and the financial benefits of remaining part of the union by starting to direct funding into projects in Scotland, notwithstanding the devolution settlement. So, on the one, it seems contradictory that on the one hand, I would think their immediate instinctive response is to refuse any request for support, but at the same time they want to be demonstrating that they are supporting. So I think we might see a little bit of a conflict start to appear in the cabinet regarding this. But if history teaches us anything, it is that we will not figure in people's calculations, and we will not receive the support that we deserve.
Okay, listen, thank you very much, Andrew, for that. Moving on now from the Brexit damage to exports, and I want to talk to you about a House of Commons Petitions Committee survey, the results of which were published recently. Now, this is a survey of 50. It's a study of 15,000 artists, basically, and we have here, obviously, with us this afternoon, Julie Coombe from Equity, the Actors and Performers Union. And Julie, as a member of Equity and as an actor and performer yourself, how has Brexit affected your industry so far?
Well, at the moment, the industry is absolutely been knocked for six by COVID. We know that everything shut down almost a year ago. Everything shut down. Things are starting to come back, more recorded media and things. But Brexit, we as a union, Equity is an apolitical organisation. And, I've been on the Scottish Committee for a good few years now, and we sort of pushed them and said, what is our stance on Brexit? We need to take a stance. And eventually we came out with a remain. We would remain. Because it's going to have a massive impact. The touring for Europe, people, I've got a friend who lives not far from me in Edinburgh, who spends most of his time in these sort of historical epics that, he's running about in a forest in Budapest, dressed as some sort of Visigoth and all that. These things, the castings are already coming out saying, do not apply if you do not have an EU passport. Basically, if it's more expensive to have actors and performers from the UK, why would you bother? And this is what we were saying. It's going to have a massive impact in that respect. Also, there's going to be cuts in funding for the arts. The arts are already scraping to get past, to get by. We know that. We're hanging on with fingernails. And we are not top of the list of this Tory government. We are not. We just aren't. So we're already, getting the scraps from the rich man's table, and we're not going to be top of the list when it comes to Brexit, because Brexit is going to be such an unmitigated disaster in every other aspect that they're going to say, well, the arts is not important. And actually, the arts is very, very important, because if there's one thing that we are respected for on a global stage is entertainment, pop music, theatre, we are. That is our soft power at the moment. And Brexit is going to cut off so many possibilities. Even massive groups, massive bands like Coldplay, all that kind of thing. They're like, oh, well, it's going to be quite expensive. I have to say, Roger Daltrey from The Who is a crazy mad Brexiteer. Oh, yeah, we'll do it. And now he's going to have to pay visas. They're going to have to pay visas to get into every single country that they go, because it's not going to be a once, pay this and you can go anywhere you like. So Roger Daltrey, oh, I didn't realise. And you think, oh, what, Rog? Is this a big surprise? So, and it's not just, if you take a band and you have to register, you've got a visa for every instrument, every person. And let's face it, The Who can afford it. Coldplay
Yeah.
can afford it, that they're more likely to be given incentives, shall we say. It's the smaller people, the up and coming people, tours that go out with basically equity minimum tours.
Yeah.
I think they're going to suffer really, really badly. And it breaks my heart. It absolutely breaks my heart. And we've got a guy at the top of the union who was a vote leave campaigner. Sorry, how does
Irony.
that? How can we?
Yeah, Julie, I'm just remembering of something here, and I seem to recall that before the Beatles were famous, they plied their trade in the clubs in Berlin for months on end, didn't they? They didn't become famous overnight in the UK. They actually had to hone their performance somewhere, and they did that in Germany predominantly. Now,
They were
I'm looking.
Hamburg, I think, as
Yeah,
well. And
I'm looking at
yeah,
this. This House of Commons Petitions Committee received 282,000 signatures in support of Europe-wide visa-free work permits for touring professionals and artists.
yes,
But not only that, but 15,500 artists completed responses as well. That's an awful lot of artists. And almost every single one of them said that they were concerned about the future survival of the arts industries. I mean,
yeah.
that tells you all you need to know, surely.
I mean, if I can put it into perspective as well, like as artists and all that, sometimes we're not very good with paperwork, okay? And sometimes we don't really get our fingers out and do stuff. In the recent General Secretary elections for equity, 6,000 out of 48,000 members voted, right? So that's how many could be bothered, So those figures that you're quoting show you how passionate and how worried people are. To get actors, writers, singers, dancers, musicians, all that, to get them to actually sit down and do a survey and say, my goodness, this is going to impact me so badly, and to have their voices, to raise their voices in unison, it's really incredibly significant. And I hope somebody's listening. I really do hope somebody's listening. And our GS, our General Secretary, he's campaigning for this visa-free travel, and it sticks in my craw, I have to say. It really does, because he pushed for us to get there on a Lexit ticket. He's a Labour vote leave.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I just don't think that Lexit was ever a concept, because Brexit in its inception was a right-wing concept. And he constantly, with our campaign, Gordon, that we've been doing, we're accused all the time of, you're hoodwinking people, you've been hoodwinked. Oh, I'm sorry, if he thinks that Lexit ever existed, he's been hoodwinked, good and proper.
What is the current status of equity in Scotland? What's the most recent news concerning the organisation just now?
Sorry, this must be terribly boring for
No,
Andrew,
let's
but
hear it.
we campaigned against what started as a compulsory redundancy, which we just felt was absolutely against trade union principles. And the person who's been made redundant, it's now morphed during negotiations into a voluntary redundancy. The settlement agreement states that it's a voluntary redundancy. Voluntary.
Right, okay.
And say no more. But he has been made redundant, and this is a man who, for many in Scotland, Lorne Boswell was equity. He was the guy with the contacts. He was the guy with the experience, the dignity, the grace. There's not one actor or performer in Scotland who has not been helped by Lorne Boswell, and he's basically been thrown out. Just thrown out. He got in the way of some ambition, and we were told that we were overstaffed, that Scotland has 5% of the membership and 15% of the resources, and immediately tweets started coming in saying from English comrades, oh, we'll have to sort that out then, we can't do that. A piece of nonsense, because we run Northern Ireland as well. They were happy with that, but Northern Ireland is to be centralised and run from London. Although there are things in motion for them to have a part-time organiser, but we'll see. That's barring any catastrophe.
So it's actually caused a good man to be made redundant, basically. The whole Brexit politicization of the entertainment industry.
And it has created an incredibly strong campaign from equity members in Scotland, and they are angry, and they are angry because they are not being listened to. It smacks of Westminster in microcosm, basically. It's incredible what's happened, and it really leaves a bad. And we fear for the Glasgow office.
I'm going to move to Andrew now, because Andrew, you are now I've been appointed the secretary of this new organisation, Now Scotland, which was launched just in the last few days. Andrew, tell us a little bit more about what Now Scotland is and what it's hoping to achieve in the coming months, hopefully leading up to a referendum on independence.
Absolutely, Gordon. That's kind of you. At the moment, I'm secretary of the organisation, and I've been working with a committee of 14 other people, and also drawing on support from across Scotland and across the Yes movement to establish a new national membership organisation. The distinction here is that there are not really very many national membership organisations that support independence in Scotland, and that's in contrast to places like Wales, for example, where they have a very successful national membership organisation called Yes Cymru. And so over the last few months, a number of people have been talking about that gap, that lack of an organisation in the range of organisations that are across our Yes movement. And so after some large public online meetings in November last year, the largest of those meetings voted to establish a national membership organisation. And so that is what we have done. In a very short period of time, something like 8 weeks, the inaugural National Committee of 15 has established almost everything that's required to set this organisation up and have it running. We went live with members being able to join on Friday evening, and last time I looked, we were at just short of 1,500 people have signed up in about a day and a half, which is a tremendous achievement. But we are keen to maximise the membership as much as we possibly can. And the reason for maximising that membership and for setting up the organisation in the first place, I think, is to achieve two things in the initial stages. Firstly, a national membership organisation using the technology that's available to us nowadays is able to mobilise and organise the Yes movement more easily and more quickly and more efficiently. At the moment, we don't mobilise or organise on the streets because of COVID, but that's not to say that we can't mobilise and organise in people's homes, in their front rooms, online, using the technology that's really come to the fore in the past 12 months. So the first thing that we need to do, that the organisation intends to do, is to mobilise and organise. And the second thing that the organisation intends to do is to provide a voice for the grassroots of the independence movement. There isn't a national organisation that does that for the mass membership at the moment. The way in which that voice will be amplified and will be brought together is by making sure that the new organisation is intensely democratic. Using the technological means that we have to host meetings and bring people together and hold votes and elections, so that the intensely democratic nature of this organisation is really a fundamental principle. It is entirely a member-led organisation. And one of the reasons for making sure of that, apart from the benefits of being democratically organised, one of the other benefits is that the organisation is very keen to demonstrate unity. In action, and to provide for the Yes movement a platform or a space in which we can have the discussions, which have maybe become a little heated over the last 12 months because we've not been able to get together in the pub, we've not been able to get together on marches, we've not been interacting in many ways at a human level for over a year now. So the opportunity to provide a space for any supporter of independence, no matter their particular interests, to come together and have the conversations that we need in order to build or to improve the unity that we require, as we saw yesterday with the success of the Scottish rugby team. When we all work together, we win.
Andrew, your organisation has been characterised in some ways as a little bit cheekily as a faction of factions, I think I heard it called earlier on. How important do you think is this connectivity between these disparate groups? We've seen a lot of arguments online, rows and rammies about all kinds of different things. Will this organisation, do you think, have the effect of being able to re-establish the networks which used to exist before COVID?
That certainly is one of the key intentions and key aims that we want to achieve. Now Scotland is open and welcomes membership from anybody, and it's direct membership. So that's an important distinguishing feature. Everybody gets a voice. Everyone has a stake in the organisation if they join, and the purpose in doing that is to then, as you say, we recognise that at the moment there have been frictions and frustrations across the independence movement over the last year, whilst the polling has continued to improve, I should point out. So for those who promote independence and work for independence, it in any year, but in 2021 in particular, it's important that we organise and mobilise and collaborate and cooperate in setting this organisation up. I've been struck quite markedly by the interest that people who have not particularly campaigned for independence before, or who, for whatever reason, have been unable to voice their support for independence, have on this occasion come forward to help setting up this organisation. We've had a range of support from all sorts of sectors that I didn't necessarily expect, but which have been hugely helpful and hugely important in achieving what we've achieved so far, and so in such a short period of time. So I think engaging across Scotland, but also engaging across the established network of organisations, as you say, is very important. And I can assure you, Gordon, that talking and working with those organisations across the Yes movement is amongst the very highest of priorities for Now Scotland.
Thank you, Andrew. Julie, here's an interesting thought. I'm not sure how much you can fill in the gaps for me here, but Equity as an organisation, as you say, is apolitical. But would members of the Equity Union, do you think, want to be affiliated with this new Now Scotland organisation?
There are a tremendous amount of indie supporters in the Equity Union in Scotland. In fact, it's quite hard to find someone who's not pro-indie. And there's a big implication as to what happens to us as a union. I'm not going to say if, I'm going to say when we get independence. I'm so happy and excited to hear what Andrew's saying. In fact, I've been following on Twitter, so I'm your new stalker, Andrew. But I think it's a very exciting group, because I do think that, people who are indie, passionate about it, who are not SNP supporters and all that, I think it's just really good to get with like-minded people and get this discourse going, and as you say, move forward positively together. And I think there would be a lot of people from our union very interested in it. Yeah. Okay.
Well, listen, thank you very much to both of you for your answers on that. Now, we have one final subject to touch on this evening, this afternoon, I beg your pardon, I'm used to being on in the evening, sorry. And that is a recent YouGov survey which looks at which Scottish leaders are trusted to tell the truth. Now, particularly significant in this is that a proportion, and it's not a huge proportion of Scots, do not believe either Alex Salmond or Nicola Sturgeon's accounts of what happened with Mr. Salmond's, the allegations made against Mr. Salmond and the inquiry into that. However, what I was going to say here is that more people appear to trust Nicola Sturgeon than trust Mr. Salmond, according to this particular study, this particular poll. Now, even John Curtis, the political analyst, has come into this issue publicly and said that the UK government has cottoned on to the fact, first of all, that the perceived handling of the pandemic was worse in Scotland. They're clearly trying to politicise the damage to Mrs. Sturgeon. But most of the members of the public, when they're getting the vaccine, is a much more salient issue. And the polling shows that Nicola Sturgeon is an invaluable asset to the SNP. YouGov also found that 1/3 of people say, frankly, they don't know who is telling the truth. The other 2/3 obviously feel more in favour of Nicola Sturgeon. Andrew, first of all, can I ask you, how important is this issue of trust in our politicians in Scotland at this moment in time?
I think, well, the issue of trust in politicians generally in the English-speaking world is an issue for us. The political processes we've seen over the last 10, 15 years in the UK, in the US and elsewhere have done nothing but reduce the level of public trust in politicians. In fact, probably more than 15 years if we think back to the collapse of the John Major government in scandal and sleaze. And so the trust that the people have in politicians has reduced. It has, as a matter of course, reduced all across the English, well, probably all across the Western world, to be fair. However, in the context of a crisis, we know that people respond positively to communications that are open and honest and transparent, and it's clear that the First Minister, in the context of the crisis, has done that, and has done that much more successfully than Boris Johnson or other members of the cabinet in Westminster. So and of course the other aspect with trust is that it can evaporate like snow off a dike. So the current levels of trust, I think, are important. We know that the approval ratings more generally for the current First Minister are almost the polar opposite of the approval ratings for the Prime Minister. But I think the need to as we hopefully exit the current COVID crisis, it will be interesting to see how the perceptions of the different performances change when the imminent threat is reduced.
Okay, Andrew, thank you very much. Finally, Julie, I'd like to give you the last word on this. Nicola Sturgeon's government, I think it's fair to say, is characterised by a much larger number of women in key political roles, I think it's fair to say. But Nicola herself seems to have put in a tremendous amount of work. And you know yourself as a performer how much effort it takes to prepare and to appear on a stage in front of any audience. But for Nicola to do this every single day, surely it must have had a huge impact on her personally.
I take my hat off to her. I was out on a campaign thing two general elections ago, and I met Nicola. I was lucky enough to meet the First Minister, and it was the end of the campaign, and she was almost dead on her feet, and she was still pushing everything out. She was conducting herself with great dignity, and she was so together, but you could see how tired she was. But I think, you've got to say the Oscar goes to Miss Nicola Sturgeon.
What a nice way to finish this programme, Julie. Thank you very much for that as a quote for today. Anyway, we've just about run out of time on the Full Scottish today. I hope you've enjoyed the programme. Of course, if you have enjoyed the programme, remember that we're running a crowdfunder at the moment, and we want you to give us a hand, because we want to be here for all the major world-shattering events which are going to happen this year in Scotland. So if you'd like to become a supporter, you can do so by following the instructions on your screen now. Go to the website and register as a supporter, or give an individual donation, or volunteer to help at the studio. That's about it from me today, from my unusual perch here in the daylight. But it just remains for me to thank both of my guests, Andrew Wilson, the Secretary of New Scotland. Thank you very much, Andrew. Now Scotland, I beg your pardon. And also to Julie Coombs from Equity. Thanks a lot, Julie, for being my guest today.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's it from the Full Scottish today. I should be back again on Monday night with Scotland at 7. But from all of us here at Broadcasting Scotland, very good afternoon to you.
The Catalans, the Basques, the Galicians in the Basque.
An independent future for Scotland.
How quickly do you think a referendum can be arranged? best practice demands that it should be 6 months.
Just looking at the overall share numbers for Scotland at the moment, the SNP 46.4%.
Hey,